British media identity Piers Morgan has refused to back away from his criticism of Meghan Markle following that bombshell interview with Oprah Winfrey. Morgan, who sensationally quit his role on Good Morning Britain after an on-air spat with a colleague, says he doesn't believe the Duchess of Sussex.
I believe in the right to be allowed to have an opinion. If people want to believe Meghan Markle, that's entirely their right. I don't believe almost anything that comes out of her mouth, and I think the damage she's done to the British monarchy and to the Queen at a time when Prince Philip is lying in hospital is enormous and frankly contemptible. So if I have to fall on my sword for expressing an honestly held opinion about Meghan Markle and that diatribe of bilge that she came out with in that interview, so be it.
Doesn't miss, does he? Joining me now to discuss this and more, my international panel from Sydney, the Daily Telegraph's federal political editor, James Morrow, and from Adelaide, host of Bernardi here on Sky News, the man himself, Cory Bernardi. Cory, I'm going to start with you. I tell you what, you know, this is about freedom of speech. I don't care whether you like Meghan Markle or not, but these are strongly held views by Piers Morgan, and look what's happening in the UK. I know that, there's a lot of detractors of Morgan in the US, but he's got a lot of support in Britain.
Yeah, I'm not a particular fan of Morgan, but I recognise his talent and the fact that he generates controversy. There's two things out of this, though, Peter. Firstly, the wokeness that has captured Britain and is capturing America happened basically under a Tory government, and I wonder how they allow these things to get ahead of steam, and we're seeing it here as well. And if I may be as provocative as to potentially spark an on-air spat with yourself and James, I don't believe Meghan Markle either. I think she's just a serial attention grabber, and I really don't think she deserves any credibility in the space. But I hope that's not going to get us both fired, or me fired, Peter.
Oh, I have to say, as a woman observing a woman, I think this will all end up in tears, and Harry will be getting his passport and heading home in years ahead. I don't think this will be a happy union, but let's hope I'm wrong for the sake of the children involved. I want to go to this other issue. Chris Hipkins, Jacinda Ardern's COVID-19 minister, well, he's been caught in a humiliating backtrack after accusing Australia of exporting its garbage, his words not mine, to New Zealand. Let's take a listen.
This is Australia exporting its garbage to New Zealand. These people have, their criminal offending has been in Australia. To all intents and purposes, many of them have lived the vast bulk of their lives in Australia. This is a deplorable move by the Australian government that we completely disagree with. However, having said that, they are entitled to do it.
So you think those people are garbage as well?
No, I don't necessarily completely agree with their sentiment, but if that is Peter Dutton's view, it's his view then that he's exporting to Australia. Probably should have chosen a better frame of words. I'm just, reflecting back the question that I was asked.
Hipkins is a goose. This is Australia's policy, of course, of deporting criminals back to New Zealand. James, we're talking about New Zealand criminals. He calls them garbage. Then he's just obviously played it out in his own head and realised he's talking about his own people there. This is crazy, isn't it?
Well, it's crazy, but it's also really, it's kind of almost amusing to watch if it wasn't so serious. The whole kindness bubble that is wrapped around Jacinda Ardern and her government is so easily punctured because it's a sort of a weaponized kindness that they use to deflect all sorts of criticism. And yet at the heart of the Ardern kind of mentality is a real sort of hardness and distrust and dislike of people. I think we see it with him calling New Zealand citizens who are deported back to New Zealand garbage after this, but we also saw this with the way that they've treated people in New Zealand after their most recent lockdown, where they were talking about punishing people for getting COVID and making the entire country go basically under house arrest because of one singular case. It just exposes the philosophical emptiness and the real, I think, nastiness of this government that likes to talk about it in the most kindly, lovely terms.
And look, I know there are good people in New Zealand, but I tell you what, the government just whinges like I've never seen a government whinge. I want to go to this issue of the Belt and Road here in Victoria. It looks like the end may be nigh, Cory. Could we possibly hope that the Commonwealth will tear it up?
I think we should be hoping they tear it up, and all the indications are, Peter, that they're going to. I mean, the government introduced these foreign coercion laws, and there is nothing that compromises Australia more than having a state government indebted to the Chinese Communist Party, which will then always call in its loans, and if you can't repay your loans or you don't toe the line, they will take control of assets, and we don't want any more communist influence in this country than we've already got, Peter.
And just a quick comment, Cory, on Taiwan. US admirals out there, this is the Indo-Pacific admiral, saying that Taiwan could fall to Beijing by the end of the decade.
Yeah, I'm not surprised about that, Peter. Let's remember that the Russians invaded the Ukraine. The world didn't do a thing. The only thing that stopped the Chinese from doing this earlier, I think, was Donald Trump. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if they want to unify Taiwan back into China. And that has huge implications for Australia and the world, because I'm not sure who's going to stand up to them.
James, just quickly, 100 years, I reckon you have to go back before a US president from inauguration to now has not held a proper press conference. What's going on?
Well, it's pretty worrisome, Peter, because, you know, we're seeing Joe Biden out at these events where he starts to forget people's names. He doesn't seem to, fully, be cognizant of what's happening all the time. And yet when he goes out to an event and the press is saying, Mr. President, Mr. President, Mr. President, he doesn't stop. And his staff are all over him saying, OK, the president has to go, press, get out now, and all of this. So it feels like there's a real protection racket going on that is keeping Joe Biden from answering questions from the American media. And I think that has to be counted as a worry, Peter.
Yeah, we'll see what happens when he actually gets in the room. The dogs will be off their leash. Gentlemen, have to leave it there. Cory Bernardi, James Morrow, as always, thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.